Contrary to some popular conceptions of the Vikings, they were not a race linked by ties of common ancestry or patriotism. They were people coming from the areas now known as Denmark, Norway, and Sweden, and even Finland, Estonia, and Sami. Their common ground and what made them different from the European peoples they confronted was that they came from a foreign land. They were not civilized in the local understanding of the word, and most importantly, they were not Christian. Their culture and language. Although they were generally a non-literate culture that produced no literary legacy, they had an alphabet and described themselves and their world on runestones. Most contemporary literary and written sources on the Vikings come from other cultures that were in contact with them. After the consolidation of the church and the assimilation of Scandinavia and its colonies into the mainstream of medieval Christian culture in the 11th and 12th centuries, native written sources began to appear in Latin and Old Norse. An extraordinary vernacular literature blossomed in the 12th through 14th centuries, and many traditions connected with the Viking Age were written down for the first time in the Icelandic sagas. The Scandinavians did write inscriptions in runes, but these are usually very short and formulaic. While there are few remains of runic writing on paper from the Viking era, thousands of stones with runic inscriptions have been found where Vikings lived. They are usually in memory of the dead, though not necessarily placed at graves. The use of the runar alphabet survived into the 15th century, used in parallel with the Latin alphabet. The last known people to use the runic alphabet were an isolated group of people known as the Elfdalians that lived in the locality of Alvadlen in Sweden. They stopped using runes in the 1920s. The North Germanic language, Old Norse, became the mother tongue of present-day Scandinavian languages. The long-term linguistic effect of the Viking settlements in England was threefold. Over 1,000 Old Norse words eventually became part of Standard English. Scandinavian words that entered the English language included lending, score, back, fellow, take, busting, and steersman. The vast majority of loan words did not appear in documents until the early 12th century. These included many modern words which used sk sounds, such as skirt, sky, and skin. Other words appearing in written sources at this time included again awkward, birth, fog, freckles, gasp, low, moss, neck, rude, sister, seed, sly, smile, want, weak, and window, from Old Norse meaning wind eye. Old Norse influenced the verb to be. The replacement of sinden by r is almost certainly Scandinavian in origin, as is the third person singular ending s in the present tense of verbs. The distribution of family names showing Scandinavian influence is still, as an analysis of names ending in son reveals, concentrated in the north and east, corresponding to areas of former Viking settlement. Early medieval records indicate that over 60% of personal names in Yorkshire and North Lincolnshire showed Scandinavian influence. The archaeological record is particularly rich and varied, providing knowledge of their rural and urban settlement, crafts and production, ships and military equipment, training networks, as well as their pagan and Christian religious artifacts and practices. There have been several archaeological finds of Viking ships of all sizes, providing knowledge of the craftsmanship that went into building them. There were many types of Viking ships built for various uses. The best known type is probably the longship. Longships were intended for warfare and exploration, designed for speed and agility, and were equipped with oars to complement the sail, making navigation possible independently of the wind. The Vikings built many unique types of watercraft, often used for more peaceful tasks. The knar was a dedicated merchant vessel designed to carry cargo in bulk. They also held a major religious importance. People with high status were sometimes buried in a ship along with animal sacrifices, weapons, provisions, and other items. There are numerous burial sites associated with Vikings throughout Europe and their sphere of influence. The burial practices of the Vikings were quite varied, from dug graves in the ground to tumuli, sometimes including ship burials. The funerals involved either burial or cremation, depending on local customs. Social structure. Viking society was divided into the three socio-economic classes: thralls, carls, and jarls. Thralls were the lowest ranking class and were slaves. Slaves comprised as much as a quarter of the population. Thralls were servants and workers in the farms and larger households, and they were used for constructing fortifications, ramps, canals, mounds, roads, and similar hard work projects. The Vikings often deliberately captured many people on their raids in Europe to enslave them as thralls or to sell them. Carls were free peasants. They owned farms, land, and cattle, and engaged in daily chores like ploughing the fields, milking the cattle, building houses and wagons, but used thralls to make ends meet. The jarls were the aristocracy of the Viking society. They were wealthy and owned large estates with huge longhouses, horses, and many thralls. They did administration, politics, hunting, sports, visited other jarls, or were abroad on expeditions. When a jarl died and was buried, his household thralls were sometimes sacrificially killed and buried next to him, as many excavations have revealed. In daily life, there were many intermediate positions in the overall social structure, and it is believed that there must have been some social mobility. Women had a relatively free status. The paternal aunt, paternal niece, and paternal granddaughter could inherit not only property, but also the position as head of the family from a deceased father or brother. Still, when she married, her rights were transferred to her new husband. After the age of 20, an unmarried woman reached legal majority and had the right to decide her place for residence and was regarded as her own person before the law. Examinations of Viking Age burials suggests that women lived longer and nearly as well past the age of 35. Most deaths, especially younger women, were presumably due to complications of childbirth. Widows enjoyed the same independent status as unmarried women. A married woman could divorce her husband and remarry. Marriages were organized by families. It was also socially acceptable for a free woman to cohabit with a man and have children with him without marrying him, even if that man was married. There was no distinction made between children born inside or outside marriage. Women had religious authority and were active as priestesses and oracles. They were active within art as poets and rune masters, and as merchants and medicine women. They may also have been active within military office. The stories about shield maidens are unconfirmed, but some archaeological finds, such as the Birka female Viking warrior, may indicate that at least some women in military authority existed. These liberties gradually disappeared after the introduction of Christianity. Men and women of the jarls were well groomed with neat hairstyles and expressed their wealth and status by wearing expensive clothes, often silk, and well-crafted jewelry like brooches, belt buckles, necklaces, and arm rings. Almost all of the jewelry was crafted in specific designs unique to the Norse. The practice of grooming was a concern for all levels of Viking Age society, as grooming products, combs have been found in common graves as well as aristocratic ones. Together, these grooming products indicate a conscious regard for appearance and hygiene. Overall, archaeobotanical investigations have been undertaken increasingly in recent decades. Meat products of all kinds, such as cured, smoked, and whey-preserved meat, sausages, and boiled or fried fresh meat cuts, were prepared and consumed. There were plenty of seafood, bread, porridges, dairy products, vegetables, fruits, berries, and nuts. Alcoholic drinks like beer, mead, beer, and, for the rich, imported wine were served. Grains and flour were used for making porridges, some cooked with milk or fruit and sweetened with honey, and also various forms of bread. Flax was a very important crop for the Vikings. It was used for oil extraction, food consumption, and the production of linen. Sports were widely practiced and encouraged by the Vikings. Sports that involved weapons, training, and developing combat skills were popular. These included spear and stone throwing, wrestling, cold glimmer, fit fighting, stone lifting, mountain climbing, swimming, oar jumping, and knife juggling. Skiing and ice skating were the primary winter sports of the Vikings, although skiing was also used as everyday means of transport. Horse fighting was practiced for sport. Icelandic sources refer to the sport of nattaleik, a ball game similar to hockey. Games and entertainment. Board games and ice games were played as a popular pastime at all levels of society. Preserved gaming pieces were made in wood, stone, or bone, while other finds include elaborately carved pieces of glass, amber, antler, or walrus tusk, together with materials of foreign origin such as ivory. On festive occasions, storytelling, skaldic poetry, music, and alcoholic drinks contributed to the atmosphere. Music was considered an art form, and music proficiency as fitting for a cultivated man. The Vikings are known to have played instruments including harps, fiddles, lyres, and lutes.